First of all, before I talk about the award and confer it, I just must mimic really a comment that was made earlier, that it's really wonderful for WWF and people who've been associated with WWF for a long time to see so many new faces. On behalf of the board, thank you so much, all of you who haven't been to a WW event before, for coming today, and I do hope that this starts to be an annual event for you, as it will be for me. It's my first conference of this nature as well. The Living Planet Award is a prestigious, it's our most prestigious environmental conservation award, which recognizes the highly meritorious contributions of South African individuals who inspire people to live in harmony with nature for the benefit of our country and the well-being of all. Our trustees and managers nominate individuals who have made inspirational and catalytic contributions to environmental conservation, and who have the ability to leverage further conservation achievements to the benefit of South Africa and WWF. In 2016, WWF South Africa takes pleasure in conferring the Living Planet Award on Dr. Jackie King. Well done, Dr. King. Dr. King is recognized for her exemplary work in the water and conservation sectors, inspiring several generations now of scientists, planners, and legislators in South Africa and around the world. We also recognize the leading role Dr. King has played in ensuring that aquatic ecological research, welcome aboard here, in ensuring that aquatic ecological research has resulted in relevant knowledge that has enabled more sustainable development and management of river systems. Finally, we recognize Dr. King's patient work with basin planners and water resource managers to ensure that innovative and practical approaches could give effect to improved water management in the real world. Once more, well done, Dr. King. Thanks for coming. Do we have the award here? Sorry.
Oh my goodness.
You get to hold the award, not my hand now for our photographs.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can we give Dr. King another round of applause? Okay, she's asked the panel members just to remain in the audience for now so that you can listen fully to her presentation. But what a pleasure it is to have Dr. King with us today. Worked in more than 20 countries, over 30 years of experience as a researcher and as a teacher. So I'm sure lots of learnings here for us to enjoy over the next 20 minutes or so. Can we put our hands together and invite her to be our keynote to kick off the next session?
Good morning, everybody. I've always thought it would be a really nice way of starting the day to have an award. And I woke up this morning and realized that that's true. It really is a very nice way of starting the day. So thank you. I look at those two words, living planet, and they epitomize for me everything that WWF has worked for around the world. I meet them in my travels in many countries, working hard in this way, inspiring people to live in harmony with their planet. And in a way, in our watery world, we're using the same two words of a living planet, trying to enhance good, caring, balanced management of our water resources. There's a lot of people that I work with, none of us work alone, and I would like to thank them all. I think they're all standing here beside me as I accept this award, but I would like to make special mention of two colleagues, Dr. Kate Brown and Dr. Alison Joubert. They work in Cape Town. We've worked shoulder by shoulder for more than 20 years. We've argued and haggled and had good fun and drunk whiskey together and tried to work to look after our rivers. So I acknowledge them too. Thank you, WWF. Thank you very much for this lovely award. I'm delighted that it brings focus to our rivers and wetlands and estuaries, and I'm pleased and honoured to accept the award. Thank you so much. I'd like to now go on to my talk. I was asked by WWF if I would look at South Africa's journey through water over the last few decades from my very personal perspective. Others who work with me would have slightly different perspectives, but I think the overall story, the details change, would be much the same. I'd like to start my journey 40 years ago when I was a young postgraduate starting my PhD on a little river in the Western Cape. I had heard that a dam was being built in the Headwaters, and I was worried about my study sites. So I wrote to the Department of Water Affairs and asked them how much more water they would continue to let down the river. I wrote it on paper, put it in an envelope, put a postage stamp on it, popped it in the post and waited patiently. And in good time, the letter came back again, the reply. The Water Affairs thanked me for my letter and asked me very politely how much water I thought should go down the river once the dam was built. I had absolutely no idea how to answer that. So I looked and I stored the letter away in my filing cabinet and got on with my life. 10 years later, now a researcher at the University of Cape Town, I was staring at that same question again. How much water should we be letting go down our rivers? The mid-1950s had been a huge era of dam building, or the mid-1900s, and most of us have benefited in some way or other from the dams that have been built. But we were starting to see the downside of them as well. Rivers were drying up, they were dying. Even ones with no pollution in them seemed to be in trouble. And we gradually realized that a large part of the problem was the dams themselves. Their job is to change the flow regime of the river, to store the water, and to let it flow down the river or in other directions at times that suit us. But of course we were realizing that that pattern of flows in the river is the lifeblood of the river itself, and we were changing it. We started to worry about, I stared at this, it was a question that I couldn't answer, and I decided that perhaps we needed to start some new kind of research that would answer the question. It's not a simple question to answer. We realized that the flow is the master variable, the conductor of the orchestra of everything that goes on in the river. When you change the flow, you change the channel, the trees, the fish, the invertebrates, the wildlife, and at the end, we affect people in many ways, and because their rivers that they depend on are changing. And of course, it's not just a simple one change and everything does this. Really, this is what it looks like. All these lines are all the different things that could be changing in rivers as we start to change the pattern of flows. And we look at this and think, how on earth can we address this problem of how much water should we let go down our rivers, while we still want some of that water for other reasons? I turned to a very good and noble organization in South Africa, the Water Research Commission, which gets its money from a levy on every sale of bulk water in the country and feeds it back into research. I asked them for money to try and tackle this problem, and to their huge credit, they agreed to take it on. I say to their credit because at the time it was a non-science, it was a fuzzy idea, it was something that people thought really was unsolvable. How could you work out how much water the river needed? But they took it on and they tasked me to find out what was going on in the world, and then recommend what we should be doing in South Africa. Before the ink was dry on the contract, the Department of Water Affairs was on the phone. They were planning dams on rivers all over the country, and they came to me to ask how much water should we be letting down the rivers. I asked them what kind of rivers they wanted in the future, and they said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, you can change the flow in different ways and you'll get different kind of rivers. They didn't know the answer, so they asked us to decide for ourselves what kind of river we should have in the future, and then recommend the flows that should be sent down to maintain it. We started with that, but of course we soon realized that it's not up to the scientists to decide what the future condition of our rivers should be. That's a choice of society, and we eventually evolved our methods to create scenarios so that stakeholders and governments could consider the different options available for their future and decide on the future that they wanted. We had a number of workshops then all over the countries in the mid-1990s as we tackled one river after another where dams were being planned. The Sabi, the Olifants, the Letaba and the Luvuvu in Kruger Park, the Orange, the Berg, the Tukhela, the Breda, the Moy. River after river we worked on, gradually honing our skills and our methods. We were working with water managers and water engineers for the first time, and it created quite a lot of problems to begin with. We had three main challenges. The first one was finding a common language. From the perspective of the engineer, he saw them as the sober-sided individual, upright citizen, sitting there thinking of his little square blocks of water, which is what he needed, the cubic meters of water for society. And he saw this exotic creature, the ecologist, who was talking about something like habitats and biomass. Whatever it was, it definitely wasn't square and manageable. But they started to work together. I went to conferences, engineering conferences, to try and learn the language of engineers, where I was once memorably introduced as the lovely lady who's worried about little fish having enough to drink, and would watch the auditorium empty as I stood up to give my talk. But there were champions in the Department of Water Affairs, in the Water Research Commission, and in the engineering companies. They wanted this to succeed, and so we persisted, and gradually the tide turned, and we started to work together as a team instead of being adversaries. I learned something very important from the engineer. It's the concept of best available knowledge. We're never going to have all the data we need to make perfect decisions, but it's, in my opinion, never too early to start. We work together with what we've got, we collect more data along the way, and we learn by doing. A very important concept which we took on board with this work. Our second big challenge was to actually understand the rivers. What do all those lines on that graph actually mean? What changes when you change one thing? And we needed teams to do that: hydrologists, hydrolicians, fish biologists, ornithologists, water chemists, geomorphologists. And when we started to look around for people to help, they emerged from all over South Africa, from our universities and research institutes and government departments, hosts of people wanting to step forward and apply their discipline to this new set of questions. Our other challenge came when sometime during our work we realized there was a gap in what we were doing. Water Affairs had said, don't worry about the people, we look after the people, we're going to provide them with water. You just tell us about the river. But we realized that there was a gap. There were the people who live beside the river and who have very close links with its seasonal rhythms. Around the world there are hundreds of millions of people who rely on rivers in this way, and they are the least, the quietest voice in society, if you like, least likely to be heard. And yet they're also the ones who are most likely to be impacted when dams are built. because the advantages go to somewhere else, to an urban area, and not to them. So we brought more people into our team, sociologists, resource economists, and specialists in livestock health and public health, waterborne diseases, and so on. One of the workshops we did had a very special meaning. It was on the Sabi River in the Kruger Park, and at that time our new democratic government was rewriting from scratch our water law. One of our ecologists was on the review panel for the new water law, and she tried Caroline Palmer from Rhodes University, and she was telling them how we have to look after the rivers if they're going to look after us. We have to keep some water in the rivers for them. They said it was a good idea, the lawyers, but they didn't think it could be a workable legal idea. But they came to our Sabi River workshop, and they went away convinced that there was something that could be written and legally enforced. And so it was written in to our 1998 Water Act. This Water Act was a world first. It recognized the rights of the aquatic ecosystems to a share of their own water. We'd moved from the 1980s, when our aquatic systems had no legal standing in terms of water, to the 1990s, when we started to see them as competing users for water, to 1998, where they had a right to water. There's only two rights to water in our National Water Act: the right for basic human needs, a certain amount for washing and cooking and drinking, and the right of the environment to have a share of its water. All other use of water in this country is by authorization through licenses and permits. The water that goes down the river as that right is now commonly called, in South Africa, it's called the ecological reserve, and globally it's normally called the environmental flow for the river. Some of the things that have happened as we've worked our way through, some of the things that have started to change: we built South Africa's first river-friendly dam, a dam that not only stores water for Cape Town, but also has flood tunnels and release gates that can release flows in a pattern that mimic the natural flow of the river. So we're using the water for urban areas, but also trying to look after the river downstream. We had some terrible droughts back in the past and another bad one this year. But compare the Luvuva River in Kruger Park, the drought of 1992 and the drought of this year. I was there just 2 weeks ago. We have put forums in place, not me, we. The country has put in forums in place in some of the rivers of the country, groups of stakeholders working along the whole river basins, trying to work out how they can share the water together and also keep the rivers running. You see from this one that indeed, in one of our worst droughts, the Luvuva River is running, albeit low, but everything's still ticking over. At the top end of Kruger Park, on the Luvuva River, is the Makuleka Contract Park. It's a concession area that was given back to the people who were moved from it when Kruger Park was first created. They've now moved back, and because of the health of the Kruger River, they have a luxury camp there for tourists. They own the land, they rent it out, they are part owners of the luxury camp concession, and they work there. To me, this is a win-win situation. These people are happy and proud, and it seems to be working. We took our science across the country and across the Southern Africa and across the world. In the Lesotho Highlands project, which was our first international work, we established the principle that people who lived downstream of the river and of the dam and who would be impacted by it had a right to compensation. In the Pangani River, we showed how in Tanzania, we showed how hydropower dams could be operated differently so that you didn't lose any electricity, but you gained back river health. In the Mekong, which has the biggest inland fishery in the world, worth $1.4 billion a year, We started to work with the 4 countries and the World Bank on how dams could be put into this system while still maintaining that fishery. And in the Okavango system, and this is a picture of the whole basin from Angola through Namibia down to Botswana with the, I don't think I can do this, down at the bottom end, the little frilly bit is the Okavango Delta. And we showed how, going from left to right, how this essentially pristine river would start to change with future development of agriculture, irrigated agriculture and dams. This is not a map of the past for the Okavango, it's a map of possible futures. The kind of information that was not available to decision makers even 10 years ago. Underneath those green and yellow and red lines, we have the details of what it would mean for fish and elephants and trees and reeds and people. I was asked to, in 2009, by the government of Pakistan to help in a conflict they're having with India about a dam that India was building in the Himalayas, which would result in Pakistan, just downstream, across the border, having no water coming through for 6 months of the year in the dry season. We took our South African methods and concepts across to Pakistan. We worked in the Himalayas with them, and then we took our case to the Hague, the Peace Palace, where it went to the Permanent Court of Arbitration. The decision by the 7 arbitrators, the judges, included the fact that a specified amount of water must come down the river from the Indian dam all year round. By doing so, they were creating a legal precedent, which was inserting environmental flows into the antiquated Indus Water Treaty, written in 1960, which had never even thought of things like looking after the river itself. South African scientists taking their South African science and methods and using it for the good of the continent and for the rest of the world. I'm now working presently with WWF on 2 of the biggest tributaries of the Zambezi, both in Zambia. Zambia is presently, it has a new water law which it's trying to enact. It's trying to set up catchment councils all over the country, and these catchment councils will have to have their own catchment strategy and their own plan for how they're going to allocate water. And WWF has stepped forward in Zambia to be part of that collaboration to help. The Kafue River is Zambia's biggest river, and the Kafue Flats is a huge wetland in the middle of the Kafue. It's terribly important to Zambia. It feeds Lusaka electricity and water. It also supports endemic Leche and other rare and endangered wildlife, and also fishing villages appear on it, temporary ones, every year when the floods go down to fish from this area. How can you balance all these different needs? WWF is now working in Zambia with our teams to help the water authority there to come up with the options of what their future could be like. The Luangwa Basin is very remote, eastern side of Zambia, right near Lake Malawi. Almost nothing known about it really, but the people in the basin are increasing in numbers and development is inevitable. WWF's aim is to see if we can keep the main stream flowing permanently as a free-flowing river while still organizing how development could happen in this whole basin for the good of the people there. It's an important wildlife area, one of Zambia's most important tourism destination. So those are the 2 areas that I'm working with with WWF at the moment. There's other teams like mine working from South Africa as well. There's a burgeoning body of water scientists taking our science out to the world, and we can be very proud of what they're doing. Good work, clever people, innovative ideas. We have some challenges, lots of them as you can imagine. I've just put 3 down here. We live in a dry land, and we need to get used to it. The Department of Water Affairs' slogan, "Some for all, forever," captures it beautifully. We have to get used to the idea that we can't have all the water we want, but we can have some. And all of us must have some. It's not just for some of us, it's for all of us. And we have to look after our aquatic systems so that they will continue to provide that water and other resources forever. We must resist the suggestion by some that we should leave the environment alone for now and just focus on our social problems, and then we can come back and fix the environment later. That is completely unworkable. We are part of our environment. It supports us and our quality of life in 1,000 different ways. On top of that, it costs huge amounts more to fix something up in the environment than it would to take care of it in the first place. And some of the things simply aren't fixable. They will have disappeared forever by the time we sort out our social problems. We have to work on them together. And we have to now face perhaps one of the biggest challenges. I think all of these are. A huge one is the implementation of our Water Act. We've got the concepts, we've got the policy, we've got the water law, we've got the skilled people in government and around the country in various establishments. But how do we get that body of knowledge out to the remotest corners of our planet so that the dam operator and the municipality are making the right decisions day by day that reflect the Water Act that we want? In our favour, you will perhaps have picked up from what I've talked about some of the things that I think we've got going for us. A willingness to find a common language. It's a struggle, but we can do it. We're good at asking difficult questions in this country, questions that we don't know the answer to. It's easy to ask questions that you know the answer to, but what about the ones that you don't know the answer to? And we're good at asking those questions, and then we are good, innovative, out-of-the-box thinkers. We learn as we are doing, and we get on with trying to sort out these intractable problems. We can do these things. We've shown we can. We have watertight principles backed up by good legislation and that are recognized globally. We can be very proud of our water law. We have principles that we're putting into action, and we're building capacity. When I was in Kruger a couple of weeks ago, I was at the annual meeting of the Southern African Society of Aquatic Scientists and was energized by the young water scientists coming through the discipline. I've been working mostly outside of the country for the last 20 years, and going back into the annual meetings of my society, I was overwhelmed with this body of young scientists who I was meeting for the first time. They are great. There they were, 20 of them, sponsored by our society and by the Water Research Commission to be there, and award winners coming through, already getting medals for excellent science. It was great to see. At the end of, I gave a talk there, and at the end of it I said, if there's any of you who are looking for a direction for your career, and you would quite fancy the idea of spending the next 30 years being excited, exhilarated, frightened, tired, stimulated, and shouted at by people who don't want change, then please come and join us. And they came. After my talk, lots of them came forward. They want to be a part of this. I have no doubt that as those of us who were around 40 years ago starting this whole process step back, there is a body of young scientists ready to step forward and take over. And I have confidence that they will do us just very good. So, bring on the next 40 years. That's what I say. Shall I sit down?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. King. Can we give another round of applause? Can I invite my panelists back again? Tasneem, please come back, and also Clem. And we are now joined also by Dean Muravan, who is passionate about addressing inequality, particularly with respect to the distribution of water, and works to achieve that as part of his job description at WWF. Can we put our hands together and also welcome Dean onto the panel this time round? Okay, Clem Sumter is leading SA by telling us that one of you had left this outside on a coffee table. If you have a notebook missing, just come and collect it from me a little bit later. Okay, otherwise I'll peek inside and see whether I can infer who it belongs to. Dean, I'm going to start off with you and give you a chance just to react there to what you heard from Dr. King.
Firstly, I think as someone involved in the freshwater sector, it's a great privilege to be on a panel with Dr. King. I can tell you a number of our freshwater colleagues all over the world would be very jealous right now. So it's a great privilege.
Award-winning as well.
Award-winning, sorry, yes. And I think, the first thing that immediately stuck with me was the fact that having a discussion about South Africa's future means we have to talk about water. It means we require water for our development. You can't leave that out of the discussion. And water brings to life the starkest realities of inequality when people don't have, because it simply has no substitute. So when you don't have water, there's absolutely nothing you can do. But I think there was a number of areas in Dr. King's presentation that left me full of positivity in terms of what can be achieved. I think it's well known that our freshwater scientists in the country punch well above our weight in terms of academic ability. We're very sought after. Not that this is a job advertisement. And one of the other things that really got my attention, and we alluded to it in the earlier session, was around the youth dynamic and the youth agenda. And I think millennials are a really important component being brought into our workforce. Now, I think my boss has left the room, but I mean, oh no, she's still there, she's just waving. But millennials spend about 70% of the time working for you when you hire them. The other time they're doing their own thing. Christine, I spend around 80% of my time doing what I'm supposed to do. And that actually encourages a lot of innovation. It means that you as a manager need to nurture these people, because this is where the great ideas come, the out-the-box thinking. And that, for me, is an extremely positive element to look at in our water sector. Those young scientists, those budding young scientists that Dr. King had mentioned, bringing them into the space and creating a platform for them to innovate and fail, because failure is part of that. And that's the one thing we tend to shy away from. Innovation equals failure. You have to accept that, and that's a reality. But how do you learn from that failure, and how do you move past it? So I guess I'll leave it there, because this is something that stuck with me.
Thank you, Dean. Tasneem?
Oh, me next. I thought
Yes.
I sat here. No, thanks. Firstly, congratulations, Jackie, for the award.
Thank you.
Very inspirational, your life's journey and your life's work.
Thank you.
So thank you for that. I think that what really struck me, beside your amazing professional career and the commitment to the work you're doing, was one phrase that you mentioned in the input, and that was, in your experience in dealing with issues of water and river systems, that it was those that were least likely to be heard and most likely to be impacted on.
Very important.
And I think for you to have come to understand that so fundamentally as a critical part of the work you do as scientists, as experts, that was very striking for me. And I really would like us to explore in these conversations the absolute amazing positive element of South Africa with experts like you, scientists across the board, not just in the water field, but across the board. Energy, we can be so proud of our scientists.
We can, yes.
And then to look at that gem in South Africa and look at how we match that with the power of those who are most impacted on and least heard. Because the work we're doing isn't just for the sake of the science. It is for the betterment, improvement of the lives of people, but also for the planet. So how do we bring together this amazing pool of professional scientists, the experts we have, and those who are least heard and most impacted on. And for me, I think that the pulling together of those two would create amazing momentum for the work we do in this country. Earlier on, someone said 4% is needed for critical change. And so I'm going to, in the spirit of my being a bit of a stirrer, you see me, so we both stirrers. I think that the challenge for scientists and more broadly the environmental movement in this country, if we can call it a movement, is exactly that. It is, we have not won the hearts and minds of the majority of people in this country. And that is why we have the second challenge that you refer to. Consistently, the notion that the environment is just one separate element of our lives that we have to come back to after we address the big social issues. And we're not winning that debate in the country, and we're not changing the minds of people around that debate exactly because we do not have the critical mass of those most impacted, the poor, actually. And to be very specific, the black poor in this country engaged in environmental struggles. And the environmental struggle is a struggle against poverty and inequality fundamentally as well. So I think our big challenge as those, the usual suspect, as someone else said earlier as well, those of us who have been involved in this area of work, whether as a scientist or as an activist, is to win that battle, is to actually have those who are least heard driving these processes, being the visible faces behind how much water must flow down a river, how much water should we have that is fair and equitable in terms of access, etc.
Yes.
Let us put that front and center of the work we do. So I'm very happy that you've taught us through your own experience that fundamental lesson, and I think it's an important one for all of us engaged in this field of work. The environment must be front and center of the struggles that the poor and vulnerable fight in this country, because it's about them first and foremost. So thank you very much. That's the big lesson I've taken from you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tasneem. Clem?
Fantastic, Jackie. The one point which I really liked was the cartoon, because my mentor, Pierre Wack, who was a French scenario planner and worked for Royal Dutch Shell, said that the most important thing to do when you look at the future is to reframe your perception. And I'm afraid to say I was the engineer with the little
square blocks
of water. I wasn't the guy with the all the fishes and stuff like this. And it just went click in my mind that it's both. And so, we're really going to have to think in that much more balanced way about water in future. The second thing I wanted to say was that, there's two aspects to water as a result of climate change. The first one is obviously water evaporation rates are rising. I had to do a session with the Premier's office in South Australia with business and the University of Adelaide, and the Murray River, which is the largest river system in Australia, is actually decreasing in volume as we speak because of the evaporation rates caused by the higher temperatures in central Australia, which are now running between 45 and 50 degrees centigrade. And so it really is becoming a huge issue and involves having, as you say, a much wider recognition of all the things that water is used for, and secondly, obviously, much smarter water management techniques. And then the other side of the problem is, of course, rising sea levels caused by the melting of the Greenland glaciers and also Antarctica, not so much the Arctic Ocean. And the latest statistic that I recently got from US Homeland Security is that they now give a 50% probability to a half-meter sea rise in the next 50 years. Half a meter. Now, it doesn't sound very much, but that starts endangering our coastal cities. I wouldn't buy a house on the rocks in Camps Bay. But, you know, it hasn't actually been recognized yet. The head of the environmental agency in the UK was actually on holiday in Barbados when York got flooded. And, you know, I was doing some work in Amsterdam at the time, and they just couldn't believe, the Dutch, that Britain would allow such an important agency to be run by somebody who wasn't an engineer or an environmentalist, because their cities exist because of good flood defense systems. So your topic, I think, is going to become probably the #1 topic in terms of government over the next 50 years.
Thank you, Clem. So my request to you is that, I mean, this morning I think that we did well to do, as Jackie was saying towards the end of her presentation, to ask really tough questions. We're very good at doing that. But I think it's very important, we're now pretty much halfway through the day already, to try and shift focus a little bit and see whether we can engage those questions ourselves in terms of the how. There was a passionate plea for a how from one of the participants, one of yourselves, from the floor a little bit earlier. So I'm going to open it up to the floor again for questions, for input, and of course you can make whatever contribution you want, a comment or a question, but the following things would really, really, really please me. If you share stories of your own experiences, perhaps where you have tackled some of these challenges, either what's come out now or a burning issue from this morning that we haven't tied up, share those stories. What has worked? Why has it worked in areas where you work? So feel free to share those with us and to personalize it. And also, I think the Archbishop was right. We do sometimes anxiously want to have solutions now. But nevertheless, if there is an innovative thought that you have around how do you make some of these issues come alive in communities that perhaps regard it as a luxury to center the environment and to think the environment comes after you have achieved economic growth or less inequality. What is the answer to the how question? As much as it's an anxious question, it is a very important question. So that's about all I will give by way of direction, and then I will recognize your hands and we'll come back to the floor. A couple of hands up here, Augustine. Let's get the mic there and then we'll come back there and then out to you.
Hi, my name's Shikima Wena. I have got bronchitis, so struggle a bit to talk. I just want to say, Dr. Janet King, you're an amazing woman, and your work is amazing. My dream is to follow your footsteps, but in a different light. I'm a social and awareness documentarian that works for the environment and for people that haven't really got a voice out there. So at the moment, I'm working on a project which I've been appointed by the Himalayan Ecotourism to do a project for a small community around the GHMP, the Great Himalayan National Park. This community, the Himachali people, are losing their connection with nature that they had before, very strong bond with preserving this area, because this area actually affects the universal source of water, oxygen, and climate. And they've given me the job to try and reintroduce this bond between the children there. So I'm asking South Africa and anyone that can support me on this venture, because we are seeking sponsorship, because all the teams involved, research and film, are all doing this out of volunteering. So I just want to say, yeah, you've done amazing work. Thank you.
Thank you. Stand behind her. I've heard the one about, hi, my name is Eusebius and I'm an alcoholic, but not bronchitis before. That's a new one.
Hi, my name is Michael Shrink and I'm representing WildTour. You got to forgive me, it's very exciting for me, a little bit overwhelming to be surrounded by so many like-minded people. So I'm going to try and keep myself calm and then keep my thoughts linear. It's very exciting. I want to tackle, I think I'll just give a brief background of myself, just so that you understand the themes that I'm going to bring to the table. It's my final year of engineering, civil and environmental engineering at Wits University. I've just started a company, a non-profit company called WildTour, and that's who I'm representing today. I've been in the education sort of informal industry for about 3 years, just working within the township, spreading awareness of our wildlife, and then teaching the kids consciousness and awareness. And also, I've been a volunteer for about 4 years of my life at a wildlife rehabilitation center. So the two themes I want to bring to the floor, and I'll try and keep it quick because I can blab on forever. The first one is mindset. It's something so crucial to me, and I see it as one of the fundamental aspects of our reality, and one of the fundamental things we need to focus on going forward and finding solutions is how do we get the mindset out there? How do we get people wanting to look after nature, you know? I mean, I think one of the MCs mentioned Pokemon Go. It's really scary to me how Pokemon Go is so incredibly worldwide. I mean, it's just exploded, you know? And I'm sitting down and questioning how is it that environmental issues and environmental awareness and things like the fantastic work that these people are doing, why is that not catching on as much as something like a simple game, you know? And it really scares me that something like that can catch on like wildfire and create the potential for positive change. But these enormous issues that people are facing every day are sort of in the back burner, in the back of people's minds, and the discussions are happening, but they're nowhere near where they need to be. So my big focus is on mindset and challenging everyone to spread the consciousness and the awareness. You know, that the average person is not aware of the issues that we're facing. You know, and I see that in the townships. It's incredible. I mean, and it's really difficult. A lot of our people are saying rings true with me. It's so difficult to go into a township and talk to these people who are struggling every day with social challenges and poverty. How do you talk to them about animals and wildlife and rivers and rehabilitation and environmental awareness when their problems are essentially a lot greater on a personal level, you know? So I think the fundamental is mindset. You know, you gotta get it across to every single person that we need to protect what we have, you know? I feel like we're running out of time, and although the mindset and the consciousness movement is growing quite rapidly, it needs to grow bigger and faster and greater, you know? Like Pokemon Go should be nothing compared to what WWF and WildServe and your new company is. You know, those things should be trending all the time. There should be apps, there should be games. People should be genuinely interested and wanting to follow these things, you know? There's a lot more I can say about that, but like I said,
okay, just 30 seconds. I want to harness your energy a bit more at the risk of making Pokemon Go trend ahead of the conference.
Okay,
what is your own answer? Now, I've got a question for you. Don't worry, just breathe. We're loving your energy.
There is one more theme.
We'll get there. The Pokemon Go example, instead of being scared of it, because what is important is understanding where and how young people live and behave, right?
Yeah.
And then learning lessons from there and then replicating it in respect of bigger social problems.
Absolutely.
Do you think that there's a practical lesson there so that you can answer your own question about mind shift and how to get that across?
Absolutely. My fear is starting a debate, because I do have a lot of solutions in mind, and I think a lot of it is very debatable. But I think the key is starting with the youth and making these things cool. You know, it's cool to save a species. It's cool to help a river system. You know, I mean, you gotta create that. It's all about the vibe. You know, people need to want to do things, and in order for them to want to do that, it needs to be cool. It needs to be the social norm. Yeah, that's sort of the theme of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Brilliant. I love that.
Thank you. Just one more theme quickly. Sorry. I'm gonna wrap it up quickly.
He's unstoppable, man. Don't blame me.
My main driving force and my passion comes from wildlife, and there hasn't been enough talk about wildlife. I mean, I know there's tons and tons of stuff that needs to be talked about, but wildlife is one of the massive aspects that South Africa has to offer. You know, to its people, to the culture, to the rest of the world. Wildlife is something that we have to be super proud of and punting it huge. You know, that the fact that we're losing species all the time. I mean, the rehabilitation sector is tiny, right? The places I used to volunteer for, they had 10,000 plus cases a year, and that's not even a pinch of the problems out there. So I just think there needs to be a lot more discussion about wildlife and how beautiful and unique our wildlife is. And the fact that it's just so important to protect that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Nonkulula Kakane. I work for an organization called Chikululu Social Investments, but my comments are my own, private comments. I just have two thoughts around the question of what can we do. The first thing that came to my mind is, especially when Tasneem was talking about how do we capture the hearts and the minds of people. And I almost want to become philosophical and say, I don't know if it's because of the influence of the arch being present, but I want to be philosophical and say that with regards to South African people and the environment, it's almost as if we need to remember who we were or are. If you look at indigenous African people, actually harmony with the environment, for example, the Khoi people, is at the center of their belief system. So it's almost as if we need to go back to that kind of thinking, essentially. That's why I'm referring to remembering who we are or were. The second part that I wanted to say was, particularly because Dr. King, of Dr. King's talk, and congratulations on your award, is we need to move research away from remaining in ivory towers and scientific journals to help people understand exactly what it actually means for them. So when whatever comes out of the work that we're doing and it just remains in the journals and it's scientific speak, you lose people. You lose, well, I don't like the term ordinary people, but you lose people on the ground with regards to if you speak in those terms. So we need to think of different ways to engage people. And I like, you know, what the gentleman before me said around Pokemon Go. How can we take what we know and engage people in different ways? We shouldn't be trying to use the same message when speaking to people on the ground that we would use in these platforms, or at a platform, for example, where there are a whole bunch of scientists. You obviously use scientific language. So we need to think about a different way of communicating with people in a way that resonates with them.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Makosazana Dubazana, and I'm a part of the program called Miss Earth South Africa. I'm a regional semi-finalist, and our work is to go out into communities and change children's mindsets, communities' mindsets. We do education drives as well. This year, our theme is Waste Stops With Me, because it is me that creates the waste, and it is me that will stop it. So in line with that, when we speak, I'm also a science student, so I go to the Wits University, and when you speak about scientific scientists sort of appealing to the normal man in the street, I recently attended a workshop where they were teaching scientists how to write for the man on the street. And that's what we need to do as scientists. We need to grab opportunity and learn how to write for the man on the street. That is a very essential and important thing. And part of the Waste Stops With Me campaign, I'm currently running, I'm also working at Status A. So Status A is moving to a new green building, but the staff are saying that we are going paperless. I don't see it happening. How much paper do we use every single day? But the problem is we are not taking the idea that we're going to a green building. How do we change the mindsets in there? So I took on the challenge of going and making sustainable lifestyle tips for the workplace and things that you can take to home. So now with green buildings, you have energy efficiency, but then you're not telling people how they can do it in their own homes or in the building that we're currently in, because we're not in the green building yet. So I'm taking that step by developing sustainable lifestyle tips for them. And as well, with the Waste Stops With Me campaign, I'm not giving people tips, I'm living the tips myself. So we must make it appealing by doing the work ourselves. It is hard, but we can get there. And Pokemon Go, I know Wits University has a game design program. And one of the game designers said that he designed a game around environmental issues. So instead of killing something, you are saving an animal. So that's an idea that we can grab a hold of. You also go to vets, so maybe you can speak to the game design department and say that they must design green games, and then we can do a whole lot of things. And then go into township schools, go into your suburbs, because waste starts there, especially with food waste. Food waste is generated mostly in our suburbs. So we can create games to tackle our environmental issues, not just animal protection, but our daily struggles, because we are the issue. It's not the environment, it's us. So we can do that by creating games and a lot of things. I've got a lot of ideas, sorry I took long, but yeah, thank you.
Innovative, brilliant, activist, beauty. She's cooler than Pokemon Go. Okay, let's get a bit more input. Yes, sir.
Good day. My name is Bumbonim Simango. I am a student at the University of Venda, and I'm also a representative of the South African Youth Climate Change Coalition. Now, I share the feeling. This is really overwhelming. Wow, overwhelming, I meant to say. When I came through the door and I saw everyone, I was literally stunned. So this is a really great experience for me. Before I left from varsity for this conference, I told my mentor, who just so happens to be the only ecologist in our department, environmental sciences. I told him that, you know, amongst everything else, I am really looking forward to meeting a female ecologist, an aquatic ecologist for that matter. So, you know, I came here, it was like, I even wrote it on my Facebook. I'm really looking forward to meeting Dr. Jackie King. And so, yeah, it's wonderful for me. And with that said, I come from a rural area. It's really rural. So I am exposed to all these challenges, you know, water-related challenges that, you know, we're faced by. And so, my hydrology lecturer is always, you know, speaking about this innovative ways that we can use to fight, you know, this water crisis that we are facing. And amongst that, you know, he mentions things such as coming up with biofilters, sand dams, ceramic filters, and so on and so on. Technology that we can use, you know, to harvest rainwater even, to improve, you know, the well-being of these people. And you find that such resources are quite abundant in areas like that. It's where I come from is somewhat really mountainous, and so you have mist and so on and so on. Now, my question there, therefore is, how can we channel all these, or rather, how can we, you know, make a plea to various, you know, industries, investment sectors, to just, I don't know, propel, or at least to be, you know, I don't know, sponsors of all these, you know, technologies? How can we get them to back these ideas up? Because, I mean, a sand dam, for instance, you're speaking about high water evaporation rates. If we were to construct more sand dams, we would have managed to at least address that at a small scale. We would be able to retain water for prolonged periods of time. So how can we, you know, get such a, you know, such bodies involved, really? Because even when we speak of innovation, as you speak, there's a guy, he just, I think he went to Sweden, if I'm not mistaken. He managed to figure out how, you know, you can use cow dung to generate electricity. But you see, the thing is, you have these young people that come up with these innovative ideas. They get recognized for a relatively short period of time. After that, they no longer have that support structure. Ludwig, for instance, Marishan, another guy I'm looking forward to meeting. He's, when interviewed on 2014, he said that he earns about 90% of his revenue from international from the international market. We don't have South Africa. He says in South Africa is having, you know, issues finding sponsors and so on. So how can we just reconfigure the mindset of all these investors, all these industries to just back these projects up so that, you know, because we have the solutions. We have many. There's a beauty about such provinces such as, you have a lot of untapped potential. I'm always telling the kids, the vendor guys, that you guys are pretty much like the Asians of South Africa. You have a lot. They have a lot to offer. And if people could really just, I mean, read the headlines. The most innovative young minds come from the most remote areas, places you wouldn't. The minister of I'm not sure if he's Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi. He is amongst the most proficient, you know, ministers that have ever graced South Africa's public offices. So the point I'm just trying to raise is, you know, there's a lot of potential that needs to be, you know, explored, and not just explored. How can we just go, you know, that further, that extra mile to back them up? And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Thank you. Okay, 2 final comments for now. I'm inspired. I think we're hitting the sweet spots of the conference, but we'll get back to the panel in a second and just get back to the main program. But the innovation and the young people's voices really, really, really warm my heart. I'll take a comment over here, and then I'll give you the burden of choosing the final one that's out.
Hi, my name is Robin Ubat. I work for the Dairy Mail. I'm a scientist working in media at the moment. And I just wanted to say that I wanted to support the comments of the previous 2 ladies that stood up, and circle back to what Tasneem was saying about how to bring science to the people that are most impacted and least heard, and that the challenge for scientists and the environmental movement as a whole is to convince the 4% that they need to support the movement. And I think that I agree. The answer is that you have to understand the power of popular media. It's going to be very important to not keep science as a discussion just between the scientists, but that is how you engage the average Joe, the people on the ground. We've got to take the science to the public. Thank you.
Thank you.
My first opening line, I have a powerful voice, by the way, was when we started, I wrote something and I'm like, when bees gather, the world knows that there's going to be honey. And then the first speaker had bees as an example, and I was like, maybe I'm prophesying something. So this is quite an interesting talk, having professionals around the room with the ignorance of a normal man on the street who sells sweets for a living. So I think that's where our solutions are based. How do we make this practical for the ordinary man on the street? How do we make this practical for a learner in the classroom who's currently learning mathematics in a language that is foreign and doesn't understand what's going on? So that's basically my everyday struggle. I'm in a classroom teaching life sciences, photosynthesis, to a group of people who don't know how a plant functions. So I'm basically teaching something that is foreign, and I ask about their lifestyle. Their lifestyle doesn't involve reading. And also, how do I make science like fun for my learners, because it is full of Latin terminologies and everything. So Dr. King, when she said that we need to find a common language, how do a scientist and an engineer come together to see an environment as one functioning thing that is going to benefit everyone? And I go with the idea that we need cooler solutions. We need to make things trend. And one of the most important things when you look at the Pokemon game is that it all started as a cartoon, watched by young people. So we need to go back. How do we influence young people? How do primary school learners know that maybe they need to plant? How do we tell them that there's actually a pencil that you can write with, and when the pencil is almost finished, you can plant the pencil back? How do we take those simple science solutions back into the classroom? And I think that's where the solution is. One of the other solutions that we need is collaboration. How does the normal scientist go to the township, and make sense? How do we take your Pantula dance and make that Pantula dance understand the importance of conserving nature? So there is a need for collaboration with particular emphasis on the arts. Arts as in writers writing about nature, arts as in visual artists painting about the importance of conservation. Because when I watch National Geographic, I'm always tempted to turn that story into a poem, which is quite interesting. And how do you make the world aware of that? One of the other solutions which I think we need is how do you make legislation like common for everyone? Because currently legislation is for the lawyers and everything, and all those terminology that do not make sense. How do we conserve something without worrying about there's a law that says I must save water? So we need to change on our own, and I think the greatest influence is a child. And also, do not look at a child as someone who needs, we always need to feed them solutions. Like youth, here's the solutions. Sometimes we need to just stop and listen to the solutions. One of the other important things when it comes to nature is the sustainability of your idea. How sustainable is your idea? How do we come up with sustainable ideas that when I present it 10 years or 40 years from now, they'll become relevant? And it means going back to the ordinary man on the street and saying, how do you reduce waste? Looking at those people that are converting waste into reusable furniture, how do we empower those people? How do we make entrepreneurship to go green? How do we look at nature for solutions? Do ordinary people know about biomimicry? How do we also teach someone from Venda that you have a beautiful space in your yard that you can grow vegetables and sell them for a living? So it's all about the curiosity, the sustainability, as well as collaborations across all skill sector, which is one of the vision for the organization I've started, which is called Green Girls South Africa. Actually, the aim is to gather all women, to show that every woman is important, not only to donate an idea, but sometimes to also lead an idea, to say, how do we teach the people about nature in a fun way with cartoons and everything? I think that's where we need to go, and not with these big terminologies. How do we put cartoons into serious work and people can find the fun in it? Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your excellent input. Even if I do have an earworm now, I've got Bansula for life going on in my head. Dr. King, I'm going to give you a chance to react first on the panel. Amazing energy and incredible innovative thinking. Maybe part of the solution is that as older South Africans, we need to sometimes just shut up and listen. Not you, though.
I feel my inadequacies here because I've spent a lot of time and energy trying to find a common language, trying to transform science into something that people can relate to in their lives. But it's been focused mostly at governments, decision makers, and others who aren't scientists but have to grapple with the problems. My inadequacy is I don't know how to communicate with the people in poor conditions. I think it needs other kinds of people to work with us who can bridge that gap. I would love to bridge it, but I don't even have the opportunity to go into poorer areas normally, unless it's just passing through. There is a chance to find these common languages. You have to try and put yourself in the position where you're describing something that is important in their life that they can relate to. The fish that are going to disappear, or the household income that's going to decrease, or the reeds or trees that they can no longer use for firewood or something. And we do glean that information and try in the scenarios that we build to not just talk about what would happen to elephants and the price of water in towns, but what would happen to people in terms of increased malaria, changes in their household incomes and everything. It requires a spectrum of people to make those adjustments and communication to other people. I couldn't do it all. I think it's a team that's needed.
Absolutely. Dean, what's coming up for you?
Yeah, so just a comment first. And it's interesting. I'm going to make an assumption that if you're in the room, you either the converted or you're on your way to being converted, right? And as an environmentalist or conservationist, whatever you want to call yourself, we try and shift the paradigm. So you try and change a system and drive it towards transformational change. Sometimes we do this with a message from the 1920s. We unwittingly, what we've all done in this room today is we've advertised Pokemon Go. Yeah, people who don't know what Pokemon Go is are now going to be looking at what Pokemon Go is. In 2 weeks, Pokemon Go surpassed WhatsApp and Facebook. 2 weeks, that's all they needed. Okay? So the way people have consumed information, the way they currently consume information, has changed. And which means when we try and shift that paradigm and we want to get the transformational change that we seek as environmentalists, do we look at it from what's in it for their perspective? Because that's what it comes down to. Nobody does it for, because it's the right thing to do. And excuse the pun, because water is the basis of it, but that argument doesn't hold water because it's the right thing to do. So are we understanding it from their perspective, whether that be talking to a minister or a decision maker? They've got other things to do in their day. Or whether that be in a corporate, or whether it be to a community whose basis is, look, I just need to get bread and milk to eat. So why are you wasting my time with telling me about the river? But it can be done. So a great example for the young lady who's going to be doing some work in the Himalayas, WWF India on the Ram Ganga system have a program called the Ganga Mitras, Friends of the River, Friends of the Ganges in this case here. They mobilize 40,000 volunteers, most of whom are the poorest of the poor. But they do it and look after the river because it means something to them and they connected to it. And that's what it comes down to. And just a second comment, and I think it was Paul Pullman who recently had said that, look, we don't necessarily need more PhDs or more innovative technologies to solve the world's problems. We need leadership. That doesn't necessarily have to come from a CEO or chairman of the board. The three people who all stood up and spoke are effectively all leaders, and that's where it comes from. Yeah. And when you go back to your organizations that you represent, well, that's where you need to have those discussions. Are we having those discussions in the boardrooms or at our own dinner tables? So if we're not having it amongst ourselves, then can't we expect somebody who's in a rural area to then take a message to them and say, this is what we need to do?
Thank you, Dean.
Yes, very
Archbishop, are you one of the converted or on your way to being converted? Thank you, Salim. I was hoping someone will get the joke. Clem, 2 minutes, please. We are running a little bit behind. Yeah. I'll give you 2 minutes, and then Tasneem also 2 minutes, and then we'll wrap this session.
Firstly, given your point about the converted and on their way to conversion, I presume Donald Trump is in the room today. But I want to pick up on three things as hard outcomes to this discussion. The first comes from the first speaker about Davidson and the initiative on libraries and things like that. I really do think that there is a place for the kind of Uber Airbnb model where, because of a smart network, you have individuals making money out of their cars, making money out of their houses. We haven't ever explored a kind of smart network of NGOs. And I feel that this really is something which can be done, so that you're not just advertising yourself individually on the internet. You're actually part of a smart network that can raise money. So I do feel that in a sense, the WWW is as important as the WWF. We've got to find a smart network. The second thing is, I think that's a brilliant suggestion on Pokemon Go having an environmental twist, because it is amazing how most games are about killing things. And it would be very original to have a game where you're actually saving things. And basing it on a cartoon, maybe Finding Nemo, something like that. But essentially, it's an incredibly good idea, and somebody in the room should actually, come up with that game. The third thing is that in terms of accessing people in Africa, the best way to do that nowadays is the smartphone, because it is amazing how the smartphone is the device of Africa. And therefore, we should have apps, green apps now, which are available on smartphones. Thank you, Yusuf.
Thank you, Clem. Tasneem, you've got 90 seconds. Clem borrowed your 30 seconds.
Okay, quick thought. So I think Dean's actually picked up on this theme. But just to take it a bit further, the converted and those on the way to conversion, I think maybe one of the things that we might need to consider in all humility is changing our mindset. Not this whole mission that we're going out there and we're going to change the mindsets of others. What we need to do is look at what we have at our disposal, our knowledge, our expertise, our resources, because this is a highly, I look across the room and I can see that we are, hashtag check our privilege in this room. And then how do we actually go and collaborate and co-create, not teach, empower, give the message from somewhere else, but how do we actually, in true, respectful, humble partnerships, co-create and collaborate with those who are not resourced, who are not privileged, and who are going to bear the burdens of all of these, you know, the access to water issues and all of the other issues that we've spoken about in terms of the environment, including the issue of why would we want to preserve wildlife, for example. That might be not top of mind, but let's find that out. But you do that, I think, all of us, by shifting our own mindsets. We might have the expertise, but we cannot be arrogant enough to think, therefore, we are going to go and tell others what that agenda should be. We have to, as again, win the hearts and minds together with each other. So it's just a bit of shifting of the approach and a bit of a challenge to all of us, including myself, of course. We do tend to think that we have an homogeneous society in South Africa, and yet we're all sharply and painfully aware that we're not. And yes, there are cool things that we can do with the youth, but then there are a whole lot of youth who are unemployed, they're not at universities, they're sitting without a job, and I'm not sure if they engage in Pokemon Go, actually. So our solutions and our ideas that are amazing and innovative also has to be placed in a context that is relevant and appropriate for very diverse communities and constituencies that we have. So I think we're there, we have the ideas. Now it is for us to form partnerships. We have respect and humility and actually get to work and learn and respect the existing knowledge in the areas that we think we need to go into to teach. There's existing knowledge, existing experience, and I loved the stories out of Venda, for example, that we're not aware of. It's not our role to go and tell them what to do. It's maybe the role of us to hear what is being done as well. So I'm just asking us, can we change our own mindsets maybe to affect real, true, and caring transformation that we're all fighting for?
Thank you, Tasneem. Word and tone perfect. Can we thank Dr. King and the panel, please?
Now we can get rid of